All right. So this is really part from a sermon that I had developed. And so a lot of my data and my dates go back to before COVID. So I still think that they're going to be valid, but there just might be more updated information out there on some of the benefits for fasting and for prayer. So if you got questions along the way, that's always open to that. And I'm just going to kind of walk through this. So my journey with fasting and prayer, like probably many people, was, well, okay, I didn't grow up in a church that did much with fasting at all, if anything. But I knew this passage that said, when you pray, and but when you pray. So I knew that Jesus taught about prayer, but I also knew that there was this passage, but we never seemed to really talk about it. But when you fast, or when you fast, and but when you fast. So Jesus does the same thing twice. He goes, when you pray, but when you pray, when you fast, but when you pray, when you fast. And the thing that I just focused on for a long time was the fact that Jesus made the assumption that we would pray, and the church talks a lot about praying. And Jesus made the assumption that we would fast, and the church has often not talked about fasting at all. It's like as if in the Reformation, we were getting rid of a whole bunch of things that we called Catholic, and the fasting went with them. We just didn't do that. And I think there's some other spiritual practices that we got rid of as well. So then, having grown up as a Protestant, I did not have models of how to fast. I didn't have any teaching on how to fast. And so, as I've been trying to teach others to fast, there's a spiritual component, but I first think you need to learn how to do it without the spiritual component. And I know a lot of people may disagree with me on that, but hear me out on this. Hear me out. If you can get your body to be able to be accustomed to fasting just from a physical standpoint, then when you seek to do it for a spiritual standpoint, it enhances what you were already doing. The same way, for instance, I love to go and get on my bicycle and go for a ride. I like doing 2 and 3 and 4 hour rides on my bicycle. Why would I do that? One, it's a great way to do exercise and stay healthy. So I could go ride my bicycle with only an intent to go be healthy and exercise. But I also can take bicycle rides where it's time alone with me and God, exploring creation and spending time in prayer, spending time meditating on the word. I can do either focus. Now, I have a hard time doing both. So I think that practice of being able to do things falls on other practices as well. So if we learn how to practice them, for instance, I learned how to ride a bike before I learned how to take walks or rides with God on my bike. So I'm going to give you, like I said, these are from studies and info that predate COVID. So there might be new info out there. I haven't gone and looked for updated things out there as well. But what I want to convince you is there's a reason that you might want to look into fasting. And when you practice it for those benefits, you later can then practice it for spiritual reasons. So weight loss. There's lots of research out there that looked at 13 different studies. So they're looking at data from all these different studies. And on average, weight loss ranged from 1.3% for 2 weeks of a trial to 8% for an 8-week trial. So you need to lose weight. Fasting is a potential way to do that. And before we go any further, let me say this. I am not a doctor. I am not giving medical advice. I am only talking about the practice of fasting. So if you have any conditions that would need to go to a doctor and talk to your doctor and talk to her before you go and do fasting, please go do that. Reduced blood pressure. A 2018 study in Nutrition and Health found 16.8. So I'll come back to that in a minute. Significantly decreased the blood pressure among patients. So what is a 16-8 fast? It's really simple. You have 16 hours that you do not eat anything in. You can drink things during that time, provided that they have no nutritional value per se. So you can drink your tea, you can drink your coffee, just don't put cream and sugar in them. You just drink it as is. Otherwise, drink water. You can drink carbonated water. And I said carbonated water specifically. So not all of the not artificial sweeteners. You still might spike your blood sugar and you'll lose the benefits. But if you just did water and you put cucumber, slice of lemon, slice of lime, something in there to add flavor, if you need that, are things you can do. So here's two things: loss of weight and reduced blood pressure. So if you're struggling with some health things, fasting might be able to help you. Lowers cholesterol, the LDL specifically, and then also boosting your brain function. It will improve acuity and concentration. So, and then I'm trying to source the sites where I found this information. And again, there more than likely have been new studies that have been out there. I just haven't updated my information and looked for new studies. There's increased cell turnover. And what that is, it's autophagy. So it's when your cells replace other cells in your body. The more you eat, the less your body can replace your cells. So for many people, you can go look into this and study when autophagy happens. For most people, your body cannot and does not replace your own cells until you have been fasting for 16 to 18 hours. Some people might even go longer than that, but that's one of the things that finds is your body needs time to not have food consumption so it can shift to replacing your body cells. Also, reduced insulin resistance is another thing that happens. Like I said, I'm trying to convince you there's a lot of perks that could happen from doing this from just a physical standpoint. Lower risk of cardiovascular issues is also a thing that can happen. And who wouldn't want this? Better night sleep. So they've studied that as well. Your circadian rhythms are much better. It's easier to fall asleep and you wake up more refreshed when you've been fasting. This one I find really exciting. It reduces inflammation. So like you have swollen joints, you've got swelling in your neck or other places, whatever it is, it reduces inflammation when you've been fasting. And then it's got like, you know, your blood pressure is a symbol of that. Your weight loss is that. Your body fat is that. All of those things are things connected with that. And I usually, when I preach this, I start with Jesus and I disagree on this. And people get really, what are you talking about? You and Jesus disagree. Well, Jesus assumes that people will pray. I don't. I've found that a lot of people don't pray. I find people are open to prayer, but they don't always pray. They need help. They need reminders. They need to be engaged with other people. They need to be asked. I also am very forgetful about prayer. You'd think it'd be the thing you could do every day, the first thing you do when you get up. Yeah, some days, very easy. Other days, I just want to move to the next thing. So, yeah, when you pray, I want to say if you pray. When you fast, like I said, I didn't grow up with fasting. I didn't know much about fasting. And so I began looking at health reasons because for years and years and years, I would just try to, hey, let me buckle down. And I know I should substitute prayer for fasting and they go together. So I'll give up a meal and I'll spend time in prayer. But I was not mentally prepared to be able to fast. I wasn't mentally prepared or physically prepared to be able to fast. So that's why I encourage people to practice fasting first from a physical standpoint. Then add the practice of spiritual practice of fasting so that you have an intentional focus on what you're fasting for, what you're seeking God's answers to, what you are giving up your meals for, those kinds of things. So here's my advice on how to start fasting. When you get up in the morning and you're not hungry, don't eat. That's it. You've already fasted from the time you went to bed until the time you get up in the morning. I know people say breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Yes, when you have it. It doesn't mean 7 a.m. is the most important time to eat. It means the first time you eat for the day is the most important. Now, maybe you need breakfast, and that's fine, but then you need to change and modify this, because if you're going to try to extend the window that you eat, or I should say shorten the window you eat and extend the window you're not eating. So let's just say you eat at 10 o'clock and you go to bed and you get up at 8 o'clock and then you're eating. You have a very short window there. You've got 14 hours. No, is it 14? No. You've got 10 hours you're not eating. You have 10 hours that you're not eating. So you expand that one side or the other. You pick. I happen to think for myself, it's easier to get up in the morning and not eat. I still will have my tea. You might still have coffee, like I mentioned earlier. Don't add cream and sugar to it. Just drink it straight. If you can't do that, go with water. That's always a good thing to go with. Then, if you start moving that time to being 10 at night to 10 in the morning, you've now expanded that to 12 hours. Maybe you bring in the, isn't fasting dusk to dawn? Well, fasting can be a lot of different ways, Ben. Great question. So I'm just talking in a 24-hour day, what you are fasting. If you want to talk about some religious fasts, there are several different kinds. So let me go over those a minute too, because that'll tie into this. So a traditional fast would be, during daylight hours. So you might eat after the sun goes down, you prepare your food, and you eat after dark, and then you eat before dark before sunrise in the morning. That is what a lot of religions will practice as a religious fast. So, for instance, Muslims will do that during Ramadan. They will eat at night. They'll eat during the day. That's not what Jesus was doing when he did a 40-day fast. That's not what other people were doing when they fasted throughout Scripture. So there's that. There's a way to do that. I'm talking on the here, not on the spiritual side first, but on the what is a fast actually, and how long do you want to go, and how do you ease yourself into fasting? So if you are able to then shorten your window to eat at 6 p.m. and eat at 10 a.m., you've now expanded that. If you can get it to noon and 6 o'clock, then you've got into a shorter window of eating that's taking place. There's some other fasts that people will talk about, like the Daniel fast, which is abstaining from meat in some ways, eating lentils, eating vegetables, eating other things. That's one way to talk about it. From a scientific standpoint and from a traditional biblical standpoint, fasting is refraining from eating food. So I'm okay with using the term, for instance, of Daniel fast, because it does say that Daniel was giving up things. So that's okay. Some people will then say, oh, well, I'm going to fast from electronics. I'm okay with that language. Some people will get upset because you're not fasting. You're not giving up food. I still think there's a spiritual benefit to that and an emotional benefit, psychological benefits. When you abstain from anything, it is training your body that you are not a slave to that thing. And I think that's one of the things that we often have is the social norms of eating on a continuous basis. And it's become pervasive in the last several centuries that really, if you find indigenous people who have not been influenced by Westerners, they may go 2 and 3 days between eating, or they may eat one meal a day, or they get up in the morning, they may have a few fruit and berries and things like that, but then they've got to go hunt in order to get food for the day. So we have influenced and moved far away from the biblical practices that people had. So anyway, a 16-8 fast is when you start to see a lot of these benefits. So essentially, it's just an 8 hours that you eat between those 8 hours. So if you went from noon to 8 o'clock at night, there's your eating window, 8 hours of eating and 16 hours that you don't eat. I found when I did that, it was really easy. And this is my experience. Some people are hungry when you wake up in the morning. So you can shift that 16-8 whenever you want. If you eat at 8 in the morning, add 8 hours to that. What is that? 4 o'clock. So you could go from 8 to 4. Still a reasonable amount of time, I think, to get your eating in there. Let me see what we got. Gerald, I teach abstaining and then using the time. You would use that habit for time with the Lord. If you fast for breakfast, spend time with prayer and scripture, for example. Yeah, and I absolutely 100% agree with that. But you also can fast for, like I said, I wanted people to get in the practice of fasting. So you can start by saying, hey, I'm going to give up breakfast and I'm going to see how long I can go until I need to eat. Or you can do the opposite and say, I'm going to eat dinner sooner when I get home in the evening and try to not eat anything after that. My issue is as soon as I eat, I want to eat the rest of the day. So if I wait until 7 o'clock at night to eat, I've only got a 3 hour window that I'm eating in. And I happen to practice what's called OMAD, which is 1 meal a day. I started out by pushing my window shorter and shorter together until I was eating 2 meals a day. I ate at noon and I ate at 6 o'clock. And then I found at noon I wasn't hungry. So I started eating at 2 and 6. And I had a 4 hour eating window. And then I just shortened that up because I wanted to spend that time doing other things instead of preparing for food, cleaning up afterwards. All of that time you can redeem to do something else with. So anyway, I just wanted to address this. We don't think about it often. I don't hear people talking about it often. I just ran through a bunch of benefits for it. I want you to be thinking about it. Yes, I would love to have some of those health benefits. Great. Go practice it. Then figure out where and how you can add spiritual practices in place of the time that you would be preparing meals and eating. The other thing is, I'm not strict on what is in my diet. I'm just looking at the time that I'm eating. So if you have any other issues with food, vegan, or, you're a carnivore, I don't care. You can still practice this. It still benefits to you. And you can still take and spend spiritual time with God outside of that. Ben, I like the fact that you practice fasting, especially when you haven't done it for a while. Yeah. Well, right. Well, the reason I decided to talk about this today, because I'm going to start a 10-day fast tomorrow. Now, one of the other things that Jesus talks about is when you fast, don't make it obvious and draw attention to yourself and get accolades from people when you're fasting. Frankly, I'm not worried about that today. Very few people are lavishing praise upon me if I say I'm fasting. No, I'm not trying to go, oh, woe is me, and talk about food all the time and talk about I'm hungry. That's why I also suggest you practice fasting, just to give up meals and learn what your body does in that and learn the psychological things to overcoming the temptation of food, so that you can later add spiritual practice to it when you no longer are the grumbling, complaining person because you didn't have food. Because if you're grumbling and complaining because you didn't have food and your stomach's rumbling and all you're thinking about is food, I don't really think at that moment you can practice it spiritually. So to go, I guess, back up for a second to my journey. So I lost 25% of my body weight from fasting, and I have kept that off for almost 4 years, 3 or 4 years. I can't remember exactly when I started seriously fasting. So 3 or 4 years ago is when I did that. And I had tried for years to fast spiritually. Oh, I'm going to give up something for Lent, or I'm going to fast for a full day. And all my mind would do would be consumed with food all day long. I never got spiritual benefits from fasting until, and again, this is my story, so it might not be true for you, until I could train my body to fast, and my body knew it was going to be okay. And what I started doing was adding longer and longer fasts. So I'm going to go do a 10-day fast. The longest fast I've done is 7 days. The reason I usually, and this will be tied with Lent. So sometimes in Lent, you'll hear Catholics and others who will give up meat for Lent, but then fish and eggs aren't included in giving up meat. Just the way the ancients looked at things. Fish wasn't meat. It didn't have flesh and it wasn't on the ground, and eggs weren't either. It hadn't fully formed, something along those lines. I'm not exactly sure, but that's what I understand. So fish and eggs were okay. So Catholics will give up that on Friday and have fish fries all over the place. So I knew they did that. But Lent on Sundays, Sunday is the Lord's Day. It is a celebration day. So traditionally, you don't fast on a Sunday because it's a feast day, because it's the day of resurrection. So you feast on that day. So up to this point, I've only ever practiced a 7-day where I will start my fast on Sunday and I will go to the following Sunday. So I will actually, time-wise, conclude with 7 full days. But on the day 1 and day 8, I'll actually eat, if that makes sense. So, but I didn't just jump in and do an 8-day fast, a 7-day fast, a 10-day fast. I started with missing a meal and then seeing how long I could go before I got hungry. And as soon as I got hungry, I was okay to go eat. I gave myself permission to that as I was trying to learn the practice of it. Then I started doing 48-hour fasts. I really like 48-hour fast. And then I started doing 72. I think 72 is really the sweet spot. 72 is really when I find the most spiritual blessing, is when I do 72-hour fasts and maybe a little longer. But when I hit between 60 and 80, there's something in that realm that for me, I'm no longer thinking about food. I'm not thinking about the next time I'm going to eat. I am just focused on my time, wherever I set it aside to be with God in the presence of that. So I am going to do a 10-day for the first time. One of the other weird things, I do the cooking in my family. And my wife, I've decided, I should say, when she goes out of town for work or other things, I don't need to cook. I get to fast during that period of time. But here's one of the things for the spiritual aspect for me that has helped me. I fast on behalf of others. I fast on behalf of organizations. So, for instance, right now, some of you might know New Thing and New Thing organization. So over the next 10 days, I'm going to be fasting for New Thing as one of the things I'm fasting for. There are 10 different regions within New Thing. So there's North America, there's Sub-Saharan Africa, there's Europe, there's East Asia, there's the French speaking, there's the church digital. We're connected with and partners with New Thing. So for the next 10 days, starting tomorrow, I will pick one of those regions. I've got a prayer list from them. I'm going to pray over that region. I've also invited people who are in those regions, if you would like to fast with me, and they might just be giving up one meal. If they want to fast with me, then, hey, let's get together and pray. And I'll fast on that day, and you can fast on that day, and we'll spend time together with God. So I think that's one of the ways I'm trying to figure out and explore digitally, as how to do this digitally. Coordinating is, you set a time that you're going to fast, invite other people to participate, and they may not participate in your whole fast. They might just say, I will give up one meal and I will fast that way. Oh, I guess one other thing I did want to mention too, another kind of fast that I do hear people talk about that I'm not a fan of. It doesn't mean, and again, before you start any of these regimens, it's a great idea to go talk with your doctor. I also do not advise fasting for anybody under 20. If you are under 20, your body is still growing. I mean, depending on where you are, even 22, 23, I might not advise you to do 72-hour fast, but maybe a meal here or there would be okay once you're in your 20s. But you want your body to develop fully before you do fasting. But juice fast is what I hear a bunch of people talk about too, which to me is one of the worst ways you can do it, because you're drinking juice, which is mostly high fructose. It's sugar, which is going to spike your blood insulin. It's going to spike all kinds of other things. People do it because they can feel like, I didn't eat anything and I could drink things and I had something to drink. So no. If you're drinking something, it needs to be no sugar substitute within it whatsoever. Tea and coffee that have nothing added to them are okay, but away from that, there's not a lot of things that I would say you can do other than water, and we already talked about that. Alexandra, hey, good to see you. The fast of Ahava, that I proclaimed a fast there at the river of Ahava, that we might humble ourselves before God to seek from him the right way for us and for our little ones and all our possessions. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I find is what you want to do with the spiritual discipline of it. I also want you to be confident in fasting before you do that. For instance, if you've never done fasting, please don't join me on a 10-day fast starting tomorrow. If you hadn't been mentally preparing to do a 10-day fast over the next 10 days, don't join me tomorrow. If you say, hey, I want to pick one day and see what I can do over the next 10 days, then let me know about it. Send me a DM and say, hey, I'm going to try it on Thursday next week. I'm going to try it on Monday. I'm going to try it. And as I give it up, I want to record and think through what I'm doing. If you fasted before and you say, oh, wow, I wasn't prepared to do this, but maybe I can do 2 days next week, or I can do one day and then eat and then do another one day, I'd love that too. I wasn't expecting anyone to join me here. I've just been thinking about this, preparing for it myself, and then felt like I needed to share with people about fasting and thinking about that. And also, I've never done 10 days. So I'm excited now. I'm going to need encouragement next week, Wednesday. I got a feeling next week, Wednesday, when I'm hitting that 7 days, and that's all my body's done before, I'm going to need encouragement. In fact, probably going to need encouragement come Saturday or Sunday because I'm going to be hitting that. My body's going to go, we haven't done this in a while. When was the last time you went more than a 48-hour fast? It's been some time. We don't remember how to do this. So I might need some checking in, encouragement around hour 48, around hour 72, somewhere in there. So if you're just thinking about me and you're going, yeah, I can't participate, say a prayer for me, send me a note, check in. I'd love to have you do that if you'd like to. Any other questions about fasting, about how to do it from a physical standpoint? And I know this is not what you probably normally are used to hearing. You're used to hearing, well, go substitute prayer for it. And I think that's valuable. Go do a prayer journal, go do a journey, get a focus. I think we can add those things very simply and easily once we can train our bodies to actually fast. So, but if you got questions, you got comments, you've got other thoughts, yeah. And like we mentioned earlier, there's some other religions that practice fasting in different ways. For instance, I'll throw one other thing that you can get some of the health benefits, but it's not a true fast from the standpoint of how long you're fasting. Is you can do a 12-hour fast essentially. If you do 2 meals a day and you can't, for health reasons, blood sugar reasons, those things, go 16 hours or 18 hours without eating, you can get some of the benefits if you do a 12 hours. So you could eat at 8 in the morning, you could eat at 8 at night, or 7 in the morning and 7 at night. So you go 12 hours in between, essentially the start of your meal is another practice that you can do that spiritually too. And this time of year, that would put me outside of daylight. If I ate at 6 in the morning and 6 at night, there's no daylight in either of those times. So I would essentially be doing a daylight fast, which we were talking about earlier. Okay, I see you're typing, so I'm waiting. Thank you for hosting this. How do you handle when you aren't able to continue a fast for whatever reason? Oh, great question. Great question. So, I'll do this in 2 parts. One, I'll talk about what's my normal pattern of eating, which is 1 meal a day. However, on the 3rd Thursday of every month, I go to a pastor's meeting and we have lunch provided. So rather than having it be the evening meal, I just know and prepare ahead of time to shift my meal to being at noon. And sometimes I forget, and it's okay, but my body becomes accustomed to having changes, and changing what you do is also a beneficial thing. The other thing that happens is when I go on vacation, I don't fast and not eat with everyone else. I don't just sit at the table with the family. We're at breakfast, we're at lunch, we're at dinner on vacation and say, I'm not eating anything. I'll eat a little bit if I'm hungry, or maybe for breakfast, I just have a tea or coffee. By lunchtime, I'll have a little bit of a snack. And then in the evening, I'll eat a regular sized meal. So that's just kind of like, how do you break up what your normal practice is when different events in life happen? And then the other of, how do you handle when you are unable to continue a fast? I evaluate the reason why I need to end that fast. And I think there's an example of, I can't remember if it was Paul. I want to say it was Paul, where they had made a vow. And that's how I would treat my 10-day fast right here. I've made a vow to God. I'm going to go do this. I am intending to do this for spiritual reasons. Therefore, I treat it as I've vowed to do it. If I get to, let's say, day 3, and I notice I'm lightheaded, I'm having side effects because I haven't fasted in a while, I will eat. And I might choose to eat for 48 hours to make sure my body recovers. And then I would recommit to starting that fast again. Now, maybe I can't start that fast again immediately, especially if I'm doing a 10-day one. I might need to then spend a week and prepare to get ready for a 10-day fast again. Or I might decide that, you know what, I can't do all 10 days together. I'll do 5 and then I'll eat and then I'll go back and do 5. So I think you treat it like you would a vow, and you understand that sometimes things get in the way. Things interfere. Your body might need to respond differently. Or I'm ministering to somebody and they're offering me food, and it would be insulting to them for me to say, sorry, I'm fasting. I need to remain spiritual, and I need to do this for my own, and because then I'm trying to, on some level, seek my own praise. Or it could come across that way. So with that, I would just say, okay, God presented another opportunity in front of me to engage and reach somebody else, and my fasting got put aside. And then I would rededicate, I'd reevaluate, okay, was this an occasion that I don't have to give a strike against my fast? I re-examine where I'm at, or I add a couple of days on the end if I continue and resume. So that's how I would treat that, because, yeah, you're right. There are times where you might plan and intend to do something. For instance, like what could happen in this 10-day period of time? Somebody could pass away. I could get invited to a funeral, and I don't want to show up the funeral and be inhospitable and say, I'm not eating. For a different reason, at one of my children's weddings, I had family members who showed up and did not want to eat the food that was served at the wedding because, well, we don't eat that, or we only eat this, or we only, like, you didn't have to tell me that. You could have taken a plate of food, pushed it around on your plate, made it look like you ate something, and nobody would have thought anything about it. So when you're considering somebody else, I take that into account, and I just decide, how do I continue or how do I restart? Hope that makes sense. Hope that answers that. The other thing too, I think, is talking to other people. How do they fast? Finding a partner that you can talk about. Hey, have you been fasting lately? Hey, how are you doing? So I have a friend that we did that a couple of years ago. And what was interesting, last year, both of us struggled. Both of us struggled tremendously last year with our fasting. It's like, hey, I was going to go do a 48-hour. I struggled all the way through the 48 hours. It felt like I was starting over again. So I anticipate this 10-day fast is going to feel like I'm starting over again. But I feel like I am in a great place right now with how I've started the year in the Bible, how I started the year with my physical regimen of exercise, how I've started the Bible, or how I've started the year with engaging other people in community and blessing. And I just feel like, wow, I need to do this to enhance what I'm doing even beyond that, which I'm going to redeem and reclaim all of that time back in prayer that I would normally spend making that meal, eating that meal, doing the dishes. That's the thing I hate the most, is the dishes. But maybe you like the dishes. Maybe you don't like the meal prep. I enjoy the meal prep. So any other questions? Great stuff. Great stuff. What do you do to get over the low points where you would or do break the fast? Say more what you mean by the low points, but I am thinking about what you should do to break your fast. Fats. Fats are the healthiest way to break a fast. It is going to ease your body into eating. What I do, olive oil or olives. That's what I break my fast with every day. I eat 2 to 3 olives. Now, I buy the more expensive olives, not the pimento olives. I get garlic stuffed or jalapeno stuffed olives, but a couple of olives, an avocado, things that are rich in fat. I eat that, and then I start preparing the meal. So I will eat that. It breaks my fast. It gives my body a chance to realize, oh, food is going to be coming. I'm going to have that. And then by the time I go to eat, it's kind of that way. So that is my pattern of breaking a fast. But I think you're asking about the low points when you would mentally, physically feel like you need to break the fast. Is that what you're asking? Yeah, that's what you're asking. One of the things I do, I just pray and I read scripture. I find that's a helpful thing because it shifts my focus off of my body and what my body is longing to be or want. The thing I do not do, which is not helpful, is just sit and consume TV or other digital media, even a podcast or informational things, because then I'm in that posture of not actively doing something. I'm passive. So I either actively pray or actively read scripture, or sometimes I will actively go exercise. Now that one might seem a little odd, but I found that like I can't do that quite this time of year. I'm waiting for some snow to melt and the roads to be clear to go outside. That's the best time for me, is getting in creation. Like, for instance, if I just walk out the door of my house and have no food with me and go for a walk, I'm not physically able to eat for a while. And doing the physical exercise will take my mind off of my body. Or I like to hop on my bicycle and go for a ride and do that. I'll have water with me. I'm prepared. I go away. When I come back, my body's thinking about the fact it just exercised. So those are a couple of things that I do that are helpful. The problem is you may not have an hour or even a half an hour at that moment where you're struggling to be able to go do a walk or go out in creation or do exercise of any kind. You might be, I got to go to a meeting in 10 minutes. Then I would go to prayer and scripture. If you, like I said earlier, if you've got a partner that can be praying for you, that does fasting alongside of you, message them, just say, really struggling today with my fasting. Can you pray for me? Just lift me up right now. And, get a text message back saying praying for you is just an encouragement to stay in there and continue. The other thing too, like I said, is work your way up to things. I wouldn't expect if anybody here to jump in and do a 10-day fast if you've never done it. I would first say, give up one meal. Get to the point where one meal is an easy thing to give up if you intend to and you choose to. Give up snacks in between. Give those up so that you're not doing those. And then start saying, well, I'm going to do a 24-hour fast. So a 24-hour fast, let's say you eat at 6 at night. You wait until 6 o'clock the next day. You eat again. I know technically it's 23, but you can just call it a 24-hour fast because you start and end at the same time, so to speak. And then expand from there. If you start at night and you fast the whole next day, then just go to bed, get up in the morning and eat breakfast. You expanded your fast. Just take small steps with that. And then along the way, intentionally put places together where you can put the time for God in there. So for instance, if I'm giving up breakfast, it doesn't mean that I immediately have the chance to give time to God back. I might instead say, I'm going to reclaim sleep instead of getting up to eat so that I'm better rested, so I can be more effective. And then during my lunch hour, I'm going to give my time to God. So you can put it in there wherever you want. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I can think of with fasting. But again, I'll just say this. I said at the beginning, so some of you came in later. With fasting, I'm not giving you health advice. I'm not a medical professional. You need to go see a doctor if you have any health reasons to not fast. If you are under 20 years of age, I don't advise you fasting. At most, if you're in your 20s, maybe giving up a meal would be a way for you to practice it spiritually. But until your body is fully grown, yes, thank you for reminding me, or pregnant. Yes, pregnant women, please don't do fasting unless it's just like one meal. I think you could be okay. Most people could be okay with one meal giving it up. But besides that, not doing 24-hour fasts, not doing 72-hour fast, if there's any health reasons to do that whatsoever. Thanks for mentioning that. I'm glad you did. Hey, any last questions? If not, I'm going to wrap it up.